by the wonderful Super Jason McClellan.
Today I'm wonderful and super wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I said just the Super Jason because you were recently at New York Comic-Con with all kinds of superheroes, or at least people dressed like superheroes. And does that rub off on you where you feel kind of a bit like a superhero?
No, and in fact, I think you feel even less like a superhero if you're not dressed in the cosplay that they're dressed in.
Yeah.
Sure, everybody's a superhero but me.
Yeah. Was it most people dressed up there?
There was a lot of cosplay, a lot more than I was expecting, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, some really, really good costumes and tons of people, man. I mean, that thing keeps growing every year. It's almost as mobbed inside the event as San Diego is now. And San Diego is, this mammoth Comic-Con in New York. It's growing at an incredible rate and almost to that level.
But
you don't really notice it as much, in my opinion.
Really?
You don't notice it as much from the outside as you do in San
sense.
Diego because New York is New York City. I mean, it's gigantic and there are millions of people going around. So the convention center where this event is held, it kind of contains the entire event, whereas San Diego, that event takes over the entire city. So you don't have to be at the convention center. You're down the streets. You're at a restaurant. I mean, every restaurant, every hotel, every place in downtown San Diego
superheroes all over town
associated with. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So that you kind of get more of a feel of this gigantic event taking over a city. Where New York, that's not really possible.
Right. And I mean, it's funny too because everything's mobbed in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many people. A lot of people. Definitely can't be like claustrophobic.
No. And if you are, you got to get over it pretty fast.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. And I think one of the most important things you got to do, at least for our field, is you got to meet Gillian Anderson.
Well, you're being a little too kind saying meet. No,
you did.
Well, not really. See, with a photo op, you get maybe half a second to go and stand by the person. They snap the photo, and then you're done.
Did you get to say hi at least?
Yes, I said hi, and I don't think she said hello, but when I was done, she said thank you.
And it looked like you were touching her. Did you get to put your hand on her shoulder or something?
I don't think I actually touched her.
Oh, okay.
I was going to, but they might have had security throw me out.
Yeah, you wanted to. I'll bet.
Don't touch!
She looked really pretty.
She looked good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's looking pretty good.
Yeah,
but
cool.
that was a lot of fun, and I wore my alien T-shirt in the photo too, so I got that in there. It was fun.
Yeah, that's sweet. Well, cool. Good job, man. Good job.
Thank you.
So our guest for today, I'm not even sure you're aware. Do you know who the guest is for this week?
No, tell me. I love it when it's a surprise.
It is Nancy Birnes. So she is the wife of Bill Birnes, and she's so funny because she's like, well, I don't really do interviews. I'm not very interesting. And what people don't realize, although if you were a subscriber to UFO Magazine, you do realize this, like Jason, you were, that she is the editor, or was the editor, of UFO Magazine. So, of course, she's an editor of, probably the longest-running UFO-specific magazine, because Fate's been around forever, and a very popular magazine. So, so I talked to Nancy, and she has a lot to say and really fascinating stuff. So, a lot of fun. Nancy Birnes on the show today.
And you're a good person to talk with her about that because you know a thing or two about popular UFO magazines.
Yeah. Yep, given that we did Open Minds magazine, which, by the way, you can still get the archives and buy lots of those, and they're really cool. So, so we have this commonality where, she was an editor. She went to go seek stories. She didn't write them, unlike you and I wrote stories and also sought to get stories from people on the outside. So, so a lot of fun and really interesting, and she's been around for some interesting stuff, and it seems like maybe she's maybe a tad gun shy, maybe should I say, just because you know how it is in this field where even if you don't seek to create enemies, people just kind of get disappointed with your work and you do find enemies. And we know what that's like, don't we, Jason?
Something that can't be avoided.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes people just gotta be mean about stuff, those jerkies. So, a lot of fun. Of course, Jason nor I like to create enemies, so we like to think everybody's our friend, until they say, screw off, man, I'm not talking to you. And then we'll be like, well, but we still like you and we want to talk to you. But, so we talked to Nancy and had a lot of fun. Because she thought that we were mad at her for some reason. Were you ever mad at Nancy?
No, but I love these rumors.
Yeah, the rumors are kind of fun, I guess.
Yes. I need to start keeping track of all these various rumors.
Yeah, and you were a subscriber to UFO Magazine.
I certainly was.
And a lot of people were. And one of the things I think we got to clear up was what happened to UFO Magazine, because a lot of subscribers like you started to see them coming not coming out as frequently, and then it ended, and we're probably left wondering what happened. So we got to talk about that.
Excellent. That sounds like a great interview.
Yeah, and almost more interesting, too, or equally interesting is how they got involved with it. So, yeah, so it's a lot of fun. We'll talk to Nancy about all this stuff. But before we get to Nancy, why don't you and I talk some UFO news?
That sounds like a great idea.
You know what's funny? Every time I get to this section and I'm like, whoa, and transition over to UFO news, I always think of the little graphic and music on Spacing Out. Little UFO news.
Excellent. That's a good vision to have in your mind.
Yeah. So, why don't you go first?
Well, Alejandro, I want to just throw this one out there because I think this is a big deal.
Okay.
The fact that last week NASA announced that they are infusing nearly $50 million into the search for extraterrestrial life. Now, this is big news to me because I think astrobiology is an incredibly important field for not only searching for signs of past and present extraterrestrial life, but also looking here and getting a better understanding of life and what life is and how life works and where it could possibly exist. I think it's incredibly an important field. It's great science, and I think it's going to be vital in not only discovering but also convincing the public at large that extraterrestrial life does exist. Mm-hmm. Now, $50 million is awarded to 7 different groups, including some of NASA's own groups, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the Goddard Space Flight Center, but also the SETI Institute was awarded some of this money. So these teams are receiving approximately $8 million in grant money, and this is going to last them for 5 years of astrobiology research. So thank you, NASA. I know a lot of people are skeptical of NASA and might not be the biggest NASA fans. They might suspect that NASA isn't truthful with us and withholds information. I am not of that opinion. I know some people are. But that aside, I think it's fantastic that money is being spent in this field of science that I think is incredibly important and will yield results very quickly.
Mm-hmm. See, I agree with you about NASA. I love NASA. I have a glow-in-the-dark NASA T-shirt that I love to wear. I wore it camping last weekend, so that was a lot of fun. But I have mixed feelings about this story. It's frustrating on one end, and I'm disappointed with NASA when it comes to astrobiology. I think they do a crappy job with it, to be honest. I think there's a lot of other people doing much better work when it comes to astrobiology. And here's some of my points. One, giving money to SETI. SETI's gotten nowhere. I hope they do something more worthwhile. I think they do a great public service reaching out and talking to people, and I love them for that. I think they have brilliant minds. I really like them, but the radio signal thing is a waste of time and kind of silly, and I hope they do branch out and try some new and different things and come up with new ideas. That's what's exciting about this news. Hopefully people get some new ideas. The other thing, I mean, when it comes to astrobiology, like the rovers not being able to look at things at a microscopic level, that means they're a waste when it comes to astrobiology. All they can detect is chemicals and minerals that might indicate life, but they can't confirm or observe that unless it's like a fossil or something. And even then, like the interview with Robert Hoover, which I'm getting to, even when they observe fossils like they did in the past, they've destroyed them and not done further research. So I'm really disappointed, and here's one thing I'm really disappointed with too, is because the other story that came out, of course, our buddies at the University of Sheffield and the University of Buckingham at the Center of Astrobiology, they had another story come out where once again they say they have proof of extraterrestrial life. This is nothing new. They say this periodically. But their evidence is growing and growing and growing. So we talked about a year ago when they talked about this and this experiment they did where they retrieved some stuff from the stratosphere, and they had some arguments as to why the biological entities that they found out there could not have been from Earth. And now they have more evidence in that, this guy from Professor Milton Wainwright from the University of Sheffield talks about how those were the only things up there. If there was wind or something that blew these things up there, they would see pollens, they would see a lot of different things, but they're not seeing that. So how did they all get filtered out, and we're just getting these little, what they're calling dragon particles, these little, what they say they're calling biological entities, single-cell organisms. So I think what they're doing is amazing, and it would have been great to see NASA throw them some money or incorporate them, because I think they're really on the cusp of something. I'm really excited about what those guys are doing.
Well, again, it's about piling up that evidence.
Yeah.
It does keep mounting, and until we can actually get people to these bodies and the proper scientific equipment there in person for these people to physically take specimens and do the proper analysis, everything is always going to be marked up as most likely contamination. I hate how absolutely everything, even when you see like this detailed fossil or something that they took all the necessary precautions, they still say, oh, that's contamination. It could be and it could not be, but until they actually get people there, I don't think they're going to be convinced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we had Richard Hoover, who had worked with the University of Buckinghamshire. In fact, he was like a temporary, he worked with them for a while, but he's a NASA scientist, astrobiologist. We had him at the conference last year, and he talked about also, the evidence that he feels that is a mass that NASA's kind of just not taking serious yet.
Yeah, it's always interesting with things like this. There have been so many great stories and stories that involve NASA's own people, like Richard Hoover, that just get kind of pushed to the side. So I am very confused by responses like that. But I'm hoping that future research will pave the way to conclusive evidence that people just can't ignore anymore.
Yeah, it is exciting. That's why I feel so, happy that we had Hoover there last year. You were able to get him, and you were really persistent to talk to him and to get him to come to the conference. And that's so cool, because I'm just amazed by what they're doing, and it seems like they're really getting close to something. And to me, it seems like they're really kind of the most cutting edge and most promising when it comes to astrobiology. So really cool. I'm happy that you were able to get him. That I think was really one of the biggest highlights of the Congress in the last few years.
And what I really like about some of the research that those guys are doing is that they are up against this huge opposition, and their work is constantly criticized. But you know what? They keep at it, and they keep coming back with more and more and more. It's just great that they don't get. I mean, they probably do get frustrated, as they should. It's frustrating, but they don't let that stop them.
Right. So the first story I want to talk about, even though I kind of slipped in that astrobiology one, that we wrote about all of this, so people can go check those out. But this is really cool. I think you probably saw this since you got back, but American University, Leslie Kean had put this on her Facebook that she was going to be speaking at American University, so I went and looked it up and wrote about it, and this is really, really cool. So there is a professor there, John Weisskopf, and he has a honors colloquium. How do you say it? Colloquium. I think that's what it is.
I loved hearing that progression. That was great.
And it's called Alien Contact Science and Science Fiction. So he's not clear necessarily on his views of this, but I think the panel that he's bringing to the university does show that. It's called UFOs Encounters by Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials. Of course, very similar to Leslie Kean's book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. And American University, if people don't know, this is in D.C., and this is like a big deal. This is like where we're world leaders, and it's one of their things. They like to have world leaders on their campus. And they go there and talk. It was, this university was created by charter by an act of Congress. I mean, this place is a big deal in D.C. when it comes to politics. And they are having a UFO panel in November. They're going to have Leslie Kean there. They're also going to have Charles Halt, of course, the Rendlesham witness, the man who was the deputy base commander during the Rendlesham event. They're going to have Tom Carey, who's really Don Schmidt's research partner and an author and one of the leading experts on Roswell. And then they're going to have Dr. Richard Haynes, who works with the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, NARCAP, and he is a former NASA researcher. He was actually chief for Space Human Factors Office at NASA's Ames Research Center. So, and these are all pro-UFO people and very, very credible people that are going to do this panel on UFOs in November. And it's going to be hosted by Miles O'Brien, who was a CNN anchor. He made some news most recently where sadly he had an accident and his left arm was amputated from above the elbow down. But he had this amazing positive attitude about it, and I think shocked the world. If you follow the news, you probably saw this, where he was just had these really positive aspects. So he's going to be hosting, and what's great about this is that he did some UFO reporting a few years ago. He did a whole week-long different story each week, and he talked about his UFO sighting. So he's had a UFO sighting. He says he's a pilot. He knows what things should do, and he saw, this bright thing flying across the sky, and then it took off at quick speed, a common sighting that people have. And so really, really cool. I think this is important, and this is going to be a big deal. I mean, it just blew my mind that this was going to be held at American University.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm glad to see that they're doing this. I'm glad to see it's, on a platform like that. And more universities are addressing this topic and having guest speakers and special lectures on the extraterrestrial topic. This one being in D.C., it's good to have it kind of on a national platform with a former CNN anchor as a moderator. I think that's cool. So I hope that this generates some attention, and I hope the university actually appreciates it and continues to have events like this.
And I think it's so cool that Leslie, I love the way Leslie approaches this field. I think it's important. I think it's what, quite frankly, I think it's what MUFON should be doing, because they say their mission is the scientific study of the field. And I think people hesitate, because the kind of stuff she does isn't always the main focus of what we would call the UFO enthusiast or something like that. But she is demonstrating because she gets more attention and serious attention than anybody. Her book is a New York Times bestseller. She has gotten positive comments from Michio Kaku, other big astronomers. And what she's doing is getting the big-time attention that, is needed. So I really got to say it's wonderful that she does what she does, and hats off to her.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
So speaking of MUFON, a couple other things. We could talk about another thing that I disagree with MUFON with. And I want to get your idea real quick. Just that MUFON put out their UFO alert, and they changed their system, luckily, thankfully, because it wasn't as accurate. I don't think now they do it by population, which is much more accurate. So you can see that on our website. They posted a new story with these multiple UFOs showing up in Georgia, but it kind of a cheesy picture. I'm not a big fan of this case, but the Colorado-Utah case that you wrote about, Jason, of course, is a really awesome case. That's incredible. And it's kind of cool because Roger did post a story, Roger Marsh from MUFON, on a bunch of cases in Colorado and Utah of similar sightings. Their researchers are saying they're mostly Google loon balloons, which I completely disagree with. I think that's kind of silly to even be saying that, quite honestly. But I do agree that most of what they're spotting here is most likely balloons. However, I know that at least one MUFON investigator tried to get a hold of 9 News and tell them that, and 9 News ignored them, which I would have done also, because you have to have some evidence. And what the reporter reported doesn't sound like a balloon, because he says it sat there for 15 minutes before a bright flash, and then this thing speeding off at great speed. These other cases may be a balloon, probably are balloons, but you gotta explain that. You gotta explain how a balloon would do that. And you gotta prove that these are loon balloons. They could be any balloons. Why are they saying loon balloons? I don't get that.
Well, that's because it's trendy now,
Yeah.
They've come forward and claimed responsibility for UFO sightings in the past. And now they're more public with their existence and what they are and where they launch from and things like that. So, yeah, it's going to become kind of a trendy thing like Chinese lanterns.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think that's, really kind of sloppy. You can't just choose some facts to pay attention to and ignore others. I mean, again, we say this with all sightings. It comes down to how much you want to believe the witness testimony or not.
Yeah.
If we are to believe the newscaster who went out and recorded these things for 15 minutes, saw them hovering, and then shoot off at incredible speeds, that's not a balloon.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And he didn't get a video of that, so we have to rely on his testimony. So, which of course can be difficult, but you definitely can't go tell this reporter, hey, we think that you were totally wrong and you didn't see what you see, and you should report on this. Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to write a story about how, it was a balloon and I was completely fooled. I didn't see this thing shoot off. I mean, that doesn't make sense. The other problem I have is I know part of the reason they're calling it a Google balloon is because in September, I think it was, September, there was a couple sightings that they did find were Google balloons, but they were able to go to this Flight Radar 24 thing that tracks the Google balloons. And they were able to show that the Google balloons were there because they saw the signature, the transponder signal. So in these cases, if you're going to call them Google balloons, which is even possible, maybe 1 or 2 were, you have to go get that data. Otherwise, all you can say is it's most likely an unidentified balloon, but you can't say Google balloon, for God's sakes. And then when it comes to the 9 News reporter sighting, I think you got to look for some other explanation there.
I agree. I mean, the responsible thing to do is say, look, based on the appearance and things like that, and many other cases, these turned out to be balloons because that's what the behavior and the appearance would lead us to believe. But this one little nugget, this important nugget hanging out there, is the fact that the eyewitnesses saw these things shooting off. You can't ignore that.
Yep. I agree. So some more work needs to be put in on this one, I think. So any other news or anything you wanted to talk about before we move on to the interview there, Jason?
No, I don't think there's anything else I need to talk about except thank you for calling me super and wonderful or whatever you called me today. I really appreciate it.
I called you wonderful and super, Jason. Yeah,
wonderful
so that's pretty good.
And super. Yep, if I didn't feel like a superhero at Comic-Con, I sure do now.
Good. All right, so without further ado, let us listen to the interview with Nancy Birnes. I am so excited to have on the show Nancy Birnes, who feels like she isn't as relevant to this field, which I think is silly, because you were the editor for UFO Magazine for so long.
Right, but I'm not the original editor by any stretch.
But how long did you edit for UFO Magazine?
10 years.
Wow, that is a long time.
Yeah.
You know, because with our magazine, a lot of the people who worked here weren't in the field before we started, but by editing and being involved with a magazine, you learn so much. You have to read so many stories. Yes,
you do, and you have to make decisions. That's, I think, the only thing you bring to the table is your taste and your. In my case, I try to make sure that it's the truth, if at all possible, because our field is fraught with con artists, you know, and hoaxers and people who are troubled, who are out and out to, government plants. Yeah. And then I think we have a nice, healthy group of real, solid citizens who are honest and true. And that's kind of what I wanted to publish the magazine for, that healthy group in the middle.
Yeah.
But, the thing is, I came into the magazine under the auspices of the Eckers, Don and Vicki Ecker. Mm-hmm. And that colored everything about my entrance in the field. It just completely, I was under the guidance of two people who had worked really hard to make a magazine, which they've done. That's a huge legacy.
Mm-hmm. Were they the ones who started the magazine?
Just Vicki.
Okay.
Just Vicki. Yeah, because Vicki, her friend Sherry Stark, started it in, I believe, 1986. I know. Mm-hmm. And, by the time Bill and I came into their lives, because of the Corso book, they had gotten to the point where they were just sick of it. They were done. They had just basically had their fourth or fifth burnout. And so we came in and, the rest is history. So there's that. But it's very rocky. And that's why I wanted to ask you the question, how did you get hired? In other words, how did Open Minds come about? It's not, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but.
You're already doing this. I was expecting that, and I got to answer because I
just really, you can do it.
So it started with really, my boss, John Rayo, he had made himself a lot of money, and he makes a lot of money with his other businesses, and he just wanted something to do. I mean, he's kind of in a semi-retired mode and gets bored with the regular day-to-day. This is interesting. He went to Las Vegas with his wife. She was going to a conference. Mm-hmm. He was bored. He wandered down the street and saw there was a UFO crash conference going on. This is the one that the Bill probably spoke there at some point, but that was
Woods, perhaps.
Yeah, the Woods conference. He thought it sounded ridiculous, but he would pop in there. And not a lot of people knew about this conference because really the Woods weren't the best at networking and getting the word out.
Not only that, Alejandro, I have to tell you, before you guys came into the business, the conference business was petering out into...
True, I would agree.
Oh my goodness, you have no idea. I just wrote a piece about all this because I'm starting to try to come out of the shadows of this thing and try to figure out what I'm going to do with my life because, the fellow that we licensed the magazine from pulled the license, this past, this year. Mm-hmm. And we basically have found ourselves, the magazine had to, and it's it's a rocky road and the rocky road ends in a kind of a crash at the end.
And I wanted to ask about this because, we'll finish off even though we're going into a tangent, but I think this is important. Mm-hmm. So you all, at some point, did you and Bill own the magazine?
No, we never owned it.
Okay.
How can I put this? You don't probably handle the financial part of the magazine. You only do the editorial, I would bet, right?
For the most part, that is true. I mean, I'm aware of the financial part, but you're correct.
Yeah, so you're aware that it's expensive to make a print publication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only real thing you need to be aware of, and it's expensive, and you can make crucial mistakes. We at various times we were monthly, which is really killer. Mm-hmm. It's $20,000 or so a month just to get the thing off the press, into the mail trucks, so forth and so on. So it's a very expensive operation, and everything has to be kind of working in coordination. Your subscriptions have to be coming in, your advertising has to be coming in, that sort of thing. So it's a financial thing that you have to learn how to do. And so basically what happened was the Eckers had fallen apart on the financial part by the time they met Bill in 97. Their finances were crashed. It happens all the time in the magazine business. It's no fault of the Eckers, but it's hard. And so another thing that happens back in the day, the distribution of a magazine is the rougher part of the equation. That's where truckers and unions and burly guys who call you up and will make you a deal. And so the Eckers made a deal for, something, if you print an extra 30,000, we'll put your magazine right up front in the stores, a deal like that. And, unbeknown to the Eckers, they had they had their own house mortgage involved in this deal.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it was a crisis when they met Bill. And they met Bill only to interview him for the day after Roswell in 1997. And so Bill is a kind of person who can put things together. He knows, he knew the people who were involved with the Day After Roswell book. They were a movie company. And he brought the idea to them that maybe they would want to buy a magazine, and that's what happened. They bought the magazine. Wow. And they retained ownership of it. And at a certain point after a few years, they wanted to sell the magazine. They wanted to sell it, I think, from the beginning. But they sold it to Bill, or they sold it to a group of 5 of us, including me and Bill, and the Eckers and one other fellow, for $1.
Wow.
They simply wanted out of the UFO business, partly because they were doing a lot of work with Christian groups. This is a motion picture licensing corporation, and they used to license movies to Girl Scout troops and church groups. And so they wanted away from the UFO magazine name. And in fact, that's probably a smart thing because, as you know, the UFO field dips into every other field. It doesn't stay the UFO field. It dips into New Age, and it dips into demonology. It dips into conspiracy. And so if you're a purely Christian kind of situation, you're not going to want to go into those places. So they wanted rid of the magazine. So I'm answering your questions. And I never get a chance to talk about this, and so I'm thrilled to be able to answer in a long way.
Yeah, well, that's what's great, because I don't think people know this, and I think people are extremely curious. Well, I know they are, because, because we had a magazine, people would always ask us about UFO Magazine, and we didn't know details, but, we subscribed here at the office, and some of us as individuals were subscribers, and so we kind of knew when we would get them.
We ended up fighting all the time. There was endless fighting behind the scenes. It wasn't a good match. The Eckers are independent. The Birneses are independent.
Yeah.
We clashed. We didn't. And then here's the big thing, and this is the legacy that I'm now having fun with. The Eckers had created their friends and their enemies lists. Their friends list, their enemies list. And I, coming in, felt that I had, out of loyalty, I had to kind of abide by those two lists. I didn't know anybody in the field, zero. And so I just simply, it wasn't written down, but every editorial meeting, they would definitely, let us know who they liked and who they didn't like. Yeah. And I now am, like in the case of yourself, I'm only now making friends with people after the magazine kind of blew apart this year and we lost our license. I'm now making friends with people that I felt that I shouldn't have been friends with before, just out of loyalty. Loyalty is a huge thing for both Bill and myself. We really, we'll stand there and be loyal till the last person leaves the room, basically, even though it's not necessary. But because of that, so there's that. I had to honor, like Don Ecker gets into a lot of fights with people, and I felt that. Yeah.
It happens so much in this field, and it's so hard to remain friends.
Yeah.
I'm embroiled in a debate with Stan Friedman right now, but we stay friendly. I don't think I have any enemies. The closest would be maybe Michael Horn because, I'm at my wit's end with that guy, and he's just been so blatantly deceitful with some things that he's one. But I don't know that I'd call him an enemy so much. But,
well, here's the thing: when you started,
but I'm done with the guy.
I understand that, and if you bring on an editorial assistant, you would like that assistant to not start up Michael Horn again, saying we should investigate this. I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, so when you came into the field, when you started,
but I don't mind so much.
What?
Like
you don't mind?
If I brought on someone who wanted to go do that, I would say go for it. I would just say that there will be some boundaries because, for instance, this week, they'll focus. Him and his guys will focus, and they'll come at and try to blitz you with stuff.
Right.
And use these bully tactics that I'm just not going to fall prey to. I'm just not going to let that happen.
Right.
And so I'd have to tell that person, well, just so you know,
yes.
We're going to limit that conversation, but you write whatever you want, because I don't like to push my view. We try to be real journalistic.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. When you first started, did anybody give you a list of friends and enemies? No.
When I came, though, I was there were three ufologists essentially, people who had been in this field for a long time, who and I don't know. I think out of the three, I probably had the strongest personality. You're familiar with the other two, Maurizio Baiada, who.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, yeah. Who certainly has his own opinions and stuff.
No. Way worse. I don't know whether you're friends. Well, are you friends with him?
I would say that I don't know if not many people really know the whole background, but the difficulty came, he doesn't speak English very good.
Right.
He, and at least, my views were very different. I certainly didn't agree with his conspiracy theories with his enemies. He created.
Does he have conspiracy theories?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's where you're going to go. But
anybody
who's his enemy has to be in with the government or something like that. I liked him as a person and stuff, but what happened was he just couldn't start up the magazine, which was his job. So he had to move on. And the job was his only ticket to stay in the country, so he had to go home.
I didn't know that.
So the other person, just so you're aware, was Antonio Huneeus, He's amazing. His mind is like an encyclopedia in this field. He's been a journalist in this field for a long time. He and I, because he was much more journalistic, were more aligned, and he was absolutely amazing. So he was the other guy there. But he doesn't really have much in the way of enemies either. So you always get people who kind of get wary of you or just disappointed maybe in the way you've covered something.
Right.
And he had that, but no real enemies. So that was kind of the scene, and I'm kind of bold enough where it's been my thing since the get-go. I mean, I was the MUFON spokesperson before I came here. That's exactly what I was doing. So, of course, MUFON has a lot of enemies and people disappointed with them. So I learned how to be very diplomatic. So I've always been really diplomatic and allow people to share their views. I like to share the facts, not call out hoaxers, but, the facts speak for themselves in many cases. So a lot of hoaxers feel I'm calling them out when I'm just sharing the facts, and the facts don't play well for them.
Right.
But so that was the kind of landscape there.
Well, I didn't know that Maurizio was involved at all. I think I might have forgotten that because
it was early on. So he was gone before things got rolling because he was supposed to be the guy to get stuff rolling, and he really couldn't. So
so let me fill you in on our relationship with Maurizio, and just you'll be fascinated, I think.
I know some of the history, and I'm fascinated with at least the side of things that I do know.
Right. Well, the thing is that if another thing about coming into this UFO field is if you're lucky enough to have a successful book or a successful TV show or a successful magazine or anything successful, you'll suddenly get your share of wolves in sheep's clothing. People who come at you saying, I want to be your friend. What can, I love this story. I want to interview you or whatever. And so, and before there was UFO Magazine, there was The Day After Roswell, and I'm Bill's wife. I'm Bill Birnes' wife. And so, let's see here. People saw a gold mine in that book. And
for people who aren't aware, because that's what's interesting about this field, there's people coming into this field all of the time, and so you got to update them on the history. And of course, some people don't know. Yeah, you all wrote the book on, or Bill helped with Corso writing the book about Philip Corso and his involvement with extraterrestrials and ETs from the Pentagon, and it was a New York Times bestseller.
Right. It was on the front page of the New York Times around the 4th of July when we timed the book. We actually had to hustle that book into production really quickly. And back in the day, there was always 9 months. It was always like a baby. Your book took 9 months from, finished to hand, physical book. And so we really, really worked hard to do that. And there was no index, partly because of the rush. And then because Bill and I have been book packagers since book packagers are a term for book producing. We are agents and illustrators, and we do all kinds of book stuff since, I think 81 when we started our company, 1981, Shadowlawn Press. And so as packagers, we knew things like there's a 50th anniversary coming up. It'd be really nice to, have the book ready. We knew that would be important. And so we entered the field, and again, we entered the field. Lordy, there is more behind it. There's the uninteresting stuff is that I'm a novelist and I was working on a novel about the UFO phenomenon. That's kind of how Bill got interested because I was sharing my research with him. And this is before the internet. And this is when we came west. We came west to in 1990, I believe. We moved to California for 20 years, almost 20 years. And I was at that time in 1990 writing a book about UFOs and stuff because I was born in 1947 and felt like I felt I could use the idea of being switched at birth, and I was going to make a fictional thing and so forth and so on. And so I have the kind of interest just because of my birth year and because you look at what year were you born?
'73, which was another big UFO year, actually.
Was it? Yeah. Well, see, also everything that happens in '73 just kind of feels kind of friendly to yourself, right? It's kind of like your year. Your mom might have saved the front page when you were born and stuff. And, so 1947 resonates with me because it's just, I came here. And, so I think I've gone off. I've skidded in onto a cul-de-sac. But anyway, so the Corso book comes along. We do the Corso book, and our lives are forever changed because now we are, for example, when we went to Roswell to do the, to introduce the book, that's the first time we met Stanton, and he was in the back of the room, angrier than a pile of bees because I'm sure he'd gotten the galleys. Kevin Randall was there. He's a big, handsome man, I think. Bill and I are both short, and Kevin is a good-looking guy, and he had his arms folded the whole time I was talking to him, and he had a cowboy hat on, I believe.
I can see it.
Yeah, and these guys were the leaders in the field. They are the leaders in the field. They were not having any of this. And Bill's kind of, Corso's a little guy. He's a weird little guy. He comes out of nowhere. And he came with his whole family to the Roswell 50th thing and all that. And so, I'd like to tell these stories, and I'm thinking of, I'm kind of putting this stuff together now, and I'm just kind of scanning stuff in and that's the other thing, Alejandro. You also were born before the internet kind of happened. Mm-hmm. And so all of your baby pictures have to be scanned if you want your grandkids to see them on the internet.
Yeah.
And so I'm scanning stuff. I'm literally living in front of the scanner, scanning stuff in. So, but anyway, so you had a question in there somewhere, and I think we all lost our threads.
No, it was kind of the inception of UFO Magazine, and actually you were talking about how, you had lists and how all this came about and how you inspired the ire of so many people, which I can see, especially with these guys, because, it's kind of this field, largely was led by, and a lot of the old timers are grumpy old men. And, I think you've really got to kind of, and I think you'd probably admit, since you're a bold and open person, I think you won't take offense if I say Bill Birnes can kind of be one of those grumpy old men.
Well, no, I think just the opposite. He came in as a young, crazy guy, like a New York Jew.
Oh, but these, and maybe it's just because he's gotten embroiled in battles and started some here and there.
Well, here's the thing. The Corso book, frankly, is full of inaccuracies, and there was never, here's the big thing, I think. It's full of inaccuracies because, it's kind of hard to explain. It happened, we had to do it quickly. Corso has a firm, solid core story that we did as much research as we could in the short period of time we had, and Corso had done a lifetime of research, and so that sort of but Corso had never experienced New York publishing big time. This is Simon & Schuster. This is and it was a New York Times bestseller for 14 weeks. That means every single week, that they keep records of number 1 to number 15, I believe. They go beyond the top 10. So this is in the nonfiction list. This is way before Amazon, New York Times, and it was on there for 14 weeks. It stayed above number 15, and so that's phenomenal. Yeah. And except for Whitley Strieber, I don't know of too many other people who have been, front page and all that. And so, so even Corso didn't really expect, that NBC would be following him around in Roswell, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the course of that weekend in 1997, we became mortal enemies forever with Linda Moulton Howe and Paula Harris. That's never gone away since that weekend, because Bill and I, particularly, behind the scenes, set up kind of exclusive interviews with, so that Linda Moulton Howe could have Corso on Coast, as she'd be the one kind of bringing him to the Coast audience. It was sort of like a favor to Linda. Art Bell wanted Corso on, obviously. Everybody wanted Corso. And we let Linda be the conduit. And we did that. We had to do that with Corso's son being very angry about this. He despised Linda Moulton Howe because she kind of came in like a journalist does, with her notebooks and her tabbed dividers in her notebooks, and she had a lot of questions, and she had, an agenda. She wanted to be the one who was kind of interviewing Corso for Art Bell on Art Bell. And I won't tell right now, because already I'm in difficult territory. I won't tell the horrible stuff that happened to everybody while that interview was going on, and what we all had to do to make that interview happen. But once Linda got the interview, she basically never spoke to us again. It was sort of like, you don't exist in my book. And in fact, she hardly spoke to us that weekend once we cleared the way and set it up. So I feel very hurt by that. And, and Paula Harris was the same way. Paula Harris, speaks Italian, obviously. Corso is Italian, and they kind of hit it off because Corso was a great old guy who missed his wife, who was a redhead. Paula Harris has reddish hair, and they just hit it off and went toddling off. And
she was able to take him to Italy.
With
he
Maurizio.
has fond memories because he was essentially right in charge of Rome once we liberated Rome.
Exactly.
So he had a history there.
Right.
Yeah, good friends with Maurizio. Maurizio and Paula obviously see things very similarly.
But we were in a huge lawsuit that we won because they stole everything. They basically tried to steal everything and take it to print, publish it in Italy, and in other words, there are rules that you have to abide by if you're in the big publishing world. You really can't take somebody's copyright. It's not considered kosher. You just don't do that in this country. And Maurizio just said, basically, I'm going to do the in other words, he had Simon & Schuster on his, he lost, obviously. I don't think there was a settlement, a financial settlement, but.
So he was going to try to print the book?
He did. In
Italian?
Yeah, they did. They all did. They took it away, they called it something else, so forth and so on. And then if you were to see all of Corso's original stuff, the stuff they did publish, you'll see what a packager or what a co-writer or what a ghostwriter or what a writing partner will do if that writing partner is professional. And you'll see that it's a smooth narrative. It's at least hangs together intellectually from the first page to the last page. And Corso's books that he published or they published wouldn't be like that. They'll just be a pile of notes. You'll see the difference.
I've got a copy of those original Corso notes.
Oh, good.
I don't even remember how, but
and that's
couple of questions. So, and I can see, and I think that's one of the problems, especially with the old timers, getting extremely territorial.
Right, that's the word.
The other thing they do is they're territorial over the phenomena in general, and these are two things that I decided I'm not going to do this because all that gives is heartache and pain, and these are things you can't control anyway. So whenever anything UFO comes that they feel is really controversial or sheds a bad light on the UFO field, they get all ruffled feathers, and it's like, you can't control this field. I mean, it is what it is. All you can do is cover it, share your opinion, share your research, but you can't control those sort of things. So, yeah, a lot of people get so upset. But you did say that there were a lot of inaccuracies in the book, but why did that happen? Was it because Corso's memory, he couldn't remember the details? Is that what you were getting at?
I think he was only interested in kind of one thing for that particular book, and that was the technology. What he specifically had hands-on experience with was a bunch of stuff that he didn't understand, that he was tasked with seeding into industry, and he didn't care at all about the Roswell crash. All he knew was he had stuff in his hands that Trudeau said do something with. Now, a thing I've found out about Corso over my own experience of going through his stuff is that he, I think, was a bit of an exaggerator. I was going to say is. He exaggerated, I think. Exaggerated his own importance. I think the stuff probably existed, and Trudeau probably told him to cede industry, which is, But at the same time, I don't think Trudeau patted him on the head as many times as he said, you're my man. And in other words, Corso inflated it. It's his right. Everybody else is dead. And Corso was in Army intelligence. And that should be, a signal to everybody that what he helped release with this book was done in, complete, whatever. He didn't break any oaths. He's not a whistleblower. He was allowed to get this information out because the Pentagon fully supported this book. Strom Thurmond knew about all this and knew about it when the book was coming out. He was relatively old and senile, but he did give a forward. He knew it was for a UFO or this stuff. I think the stuff stopped being UFO stuff so early in. It became stuff from, it was not manufactured here, I think is what they, not made here. I think they had terms for the stuff. And so when it comes to, let's say, not caring about the Roswell story at all, except his little experience with it, he said that the bodies kind of passed his, in other words, how can I put this? For, say, Kevin Randall and for Stanton Freeman, the Roswell story is important. And these inaccuracies that came in, where they were a result of Bill and Corso and Simon & Schuster's lawyers, everybody trying to put this story together cleanly. And of course, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes about how many, anyway. So when Corso was premiering this book in Roswell, people were coming up to him one after the other, and he was comparing notes. And he was comparing notes with people in ways that would shock you. Like, he and Whitley had a lot more to talk about than people would have thought. Phil Corso's son, Phil Jr., and Whitley really hit it off. And I think there's more to the story that may never come out. Because I don't know whether you've ever kept track of whatever happened to Phil Corso Jr. At various times, seeing this money thing happening, seeing this potential gold mine, he began to look around to see who he could sell the story to. Everybody had the wrong idea about how you sell a story. Phil Corso had given his life rights over to the movie company, and they guard those with a passion. And Phil sort of thought, well, I don't care. I don't want them to have it anymore. I'm going to give my life story rights to John Alexander. I'm going to give my life story rights to Steven Seagal. And he did. He did all these things. And so, my husband, Bill, eventually became a lawyer, an attorney. He's got the degree, but not didn't do the bar, or he didn't do the bar in California. And so when he takes the bar, then he's an attorney, I think, but I don't know how it goes, but, so there was, if this book had not made any money, if it hadn't sold many copies, none of this would have happened. Nobody would have cared. Nobody would have bothered little Phil Corso. There wouldn't have been any Art Bell show and stuff. And so, that's what it is. But so lifetime enemies, one could say, yeah. So anyway, well,
yeah. Hopefully, I mean, I think that people have loosened up a bit in that if they disagree, they still become. Like I think of Ruben Uriarte with the Mexico Roswell, who I don't think Stanton really cares for the story, and I know Kevin Randall, despises it, but they're still friends. So at least I think that people have loosened up, especially over the years.
Yeah, I agree.
When we see each other at conferences all year long, it's like you got to start interacting, and they're all good people. So it comes down
that's where I was gonna add that, because if, let's say, Kevin Randall or Stanton Friedman believes that you're doing your research and maybe you're getting blinded by your research, but you really are honest and true and you're really trying, then of course everybody can agree to disagree or this or that. But if you're coming into this field as an out and out scam artist, well then, and that's of course what they thought was going on with the Corso story, but over the years they, I think, understand that Bill is not a scam artist. He tried very hard to get it accurate. He never had a chance to do a revised edition. I'm telling you, that whole Corso circus went off with other people pretty early in. And each person, so at core, I think it's an important story. And at core, I think so is Rubens.
How did you all meet Corso? So how did you get this story? Because, I mean, the way, from an outsider, my perspective is, Bill got there first for whatever reason.
No, not at all. Not at all.
He became, he became friends with Corso, and Corso decided to let him do it.
No.
All is fair. That's. But I mean, my point was, I didn't believe it in a conspiracy or anything. Bill was the one who got to do the story, so be it. And it looked like, at least to me, seeing interviews, the book was as accurate as it could be, and I didn't see any, because of course there's speculation of, Bill was the guy in there trying to cover up for the government and change things and keep the real story from coming out, which I think is kind of silly. But
well, what would be the real story, do you think?
Well, that's the whole problem with the theory, is it doesn't make any sense, because you still have this man with an incredible background coming out and saying these extraordinary things.
Right.
And that's really what you have to contend with. And I think it was, all of those things that I question about Corso, I'm just going to blame those on Bill Birnes. I think a lot of that started happening.
I love that. That's easy. And here's the cool thing. Bill came into this nothing to do with UFOs. Corso has multiple stories, and at least 3 important stories. But one of them, I'd say,
beyond UFOs.
Yeah.
One
of them is POW, prisoners of war, and that's how Bill got involved. Because before the Corso book, Bill has been a co-writer with lots of different people, and one of the and in every other case, not every other case, but in many of the cases, he has become lifetime friends with the people he co-writes books with. Bill's the kind of person that most of the people from our business have been friends with us for 30 or so years now, year in, year out. We do more books, we do this. And one of that situation is a fellow named James Sanders. And James Sanders got himself yanked into the TWA 800, the shooting down of TWA 800. He got yanked into that story because his wife was a stewardess or a flight attendant. She was actually a trainer of flight attendants. And when the thing went down, one of her pals got to her this little sample from the back seats that proved that a missile went through the plane. It left a missile trail of missile debris. And so she ended up with this. In other words, his wife, had evidence, so forth and so on. And so Bill wrote that book with Jim Sanders, the shooting down, the Flight 800 book. And but Sanders' true love, among other things, was the POW story. And that's how Corso came into our lives, because they were all doing, this movie company was doing, the movie company had bought Jim Sanders' information, they were going to do something with him, and they had Phil Corso's life rights, because Phil Corso was one of the important whistleblowers that telling the world that we consistently left prisoners of war behind. Sometimes we use them as Manchurian exchange types, it's a nasty part of our history, but it's a true part of our history. And Corso testified to this, etc. So Bill was writing that book, the book with Corso about the prisoners of war and stuff. And Corso mentioned, this is 96. 95, 96. Corso mentioned to Bill when they were doing all the interviews for the POW stuff. And I took care of all that junk from Roswell. And it was like, what? And I'm born in 97, and so Roswell 47 is, it's part of our little household history, our household stuff. So Bill knew immediately that was critical and important.
Wow.
So we convinced the movie company to put aside the POW stuff for now and put aside the Rome stuff. And then Corso also had a lot to do with the Kennedy assassination. Put aside all that stuff. Corso was an amazing character. Mm-hmm. And they're all true stories. And so therefore, why wouldn't the Roswell story be true? I mean, why would this man suddenly, with this stellar, he's a very right-wing guy, always saw the CIA in bed with the communists. He was an FBI kind of guy, in spite of, he loved Hoover.
Those were some of the fascinating parts of the book.
Yeah.
When he's talking about espionage and the whole thing is how they all fight each other and all this espionage against each other and counterintelligence against the Navy and the Air Force and you can't trust the CIA. If they get it, the Soviets have it. So.
And you see it now. You see it's all kind of each and then when they did Homeland Security to kind of bring all this together, they just basically made another silo, and they're all going to be shooting at each other, basically. They're all trying to keep the secrets. Yeah.
I'm a real news hound, and that book, is one of the books I feel that had some of the best insight into how all of that works.
Well, that's Bill's specialty. Bill is really good at putting, he can retain from his, let's say his PhD, he can retain medieval history. He's a medieval, his PhD is in linguistics in medieval England. And so he can give you the history of law and tie that to how the government is breaking the law. He can and so he brings that's what he brought to the book. And why did we go off on the Corso thing? But anyway, so why would Corso lie about one little thing that meant nothing to him? The POWs meant a lot to him. And so did the Kennedy assassination mean a lot to him. And then of course, as you all know, we thought there was going to be no end to the lawsuits coming from industry, but there was never a peep. It's just sort of like, okay, now the world knows how some of this stuff happened. And I, to this day, wish I knew for sure if it's true, because, I'm still not convinced. I'm going to be more skeptical than everybody else probably, but,
Oh, and so you're still skeptical, unsure of Corso's story yourself?
I'm unsure of it all. I'm unsure of the whole UFO thing, to be honest.
You know what? Yeah, I feel for you, because I have a hard time landing on any one answer on anything. This whole thing is so enigmatic, but so terribly interesting. Corso's a great example of how I feel about this field. Such an amazing story. And people will say, well, why would he do this and why would he do that? I don't know. But just because I can't figure it out doesn't mean that it's all totally
right. He was
true.
never writing that book. He was writing the book. He was always going to make himself seem important. So yes, he was in Rome. Was he the leader of Rome? Was he really pulling, swords out of his? He had special. Mafia knives, or not mafia, Sicilian knives and things. Yeah, he was a short guy, who liked to, puff himself up, but he was also hilarious, and I think he was a relatively honest person, but within the intelligence community, honest to what he told
what degree.
Yeah, he told me once that the way that you become a good spy or a good, citizen in this government is that when somebody tells you something and says, I don't want you to tell anybody, you have a way of listening. And I kind of learned this, I think. You have a way of listening and not really putting it in long-term memory. You kind of forget it. It's like, you're never going to tell anybody. You've said you're not going to tell anybody. And so, he said that's how it is. And
so maybe I'm not a scatterbrain. I'm actually a great spy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I did want to, this is all so fascinating and it does play into how you guys got into the field and how you came to get UFO Magazine. But just to kind of finish up on that, it sounds like then, so the guys, the gentleman did he buy the 5 of you out then? Did this one guy buy you guys out and become the sole owner?
Well, no, he always retained the license.
Oh, okay.
He sold us, he didn't sell us the magazine for $1. He sold us the license for $1.
Oh.
And that he could pull anytime he wanted.
And he did. And why did he do that? Did he pull the license because he got in a dispute with you all, or because he wanted to sell the magazine? I
think the latter, and I also think because he's of a certain age, he's kind of retiring. He loves to be in Europe. He's not a hidden man. People thought this was a big mystery. He's a successful man. His name is Peter Kuiper, and he's Kuyper, and like the liquor. And he's a very successful man. I think he just wants to retire and wants to begin to divest himself of stuff. And I just think, and he was looking for a loophole. And what happened, of course, that gave him the loophole was digital publishing. We just simply, and also, we've been doing this thing with no staff, and just, I hit a burnout wall after 10 years of just like, I don't think. Yeah. But now, so he just pulled it, I think, because probably he wanted to retire. Maybe he thought he had a buyer. Who knows?
I know he thought he had a buyer in my boss for a period of time, I think.
Yeah, he did.
I think he just thought that for sure he would do it, but little does he know. See, one of the things we did is we went, because my boss's company, they do advertising with big magazines. And part of it when it comes to advertising is you have to sell X amount of magazines. So they deal with big magazines. So we went through one of the big publishers, which is even more expensive. So we're dealing with, a big company that handles this stuff. So my boss wanted to do the best of the best and make it look beautiful and be wonderful, which it was. But he was spending so much money. That's what it came down to.
Well, that's what happened with Peter Kuiper and the editors.
Yeah, and this guy, then comes to John after John is losing money already on the magazine. Say, hey, do you want to buy UFO Magazine? And it's like, would buy something that doesn't make money. And it seemed apparent that UFO Magazine was struggling financially as well. So that was just not going to happen. And so I guess UFO Magazine's dead unless he does find a buyer?
Well, that's a good question. Well, we're not allowed. He got a little bit like Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life at the end. He was sort of like, you can't associate yourself with it anymore or use UFO. And Bill was saying, hello, it's in our history. You can't like erase our history. We did, in fact, work for it. I think.
Well, and when people think UFO Magazine, they think the Birnes.
That's nice. It doesn't make the Eckers happy,
but but well, that was a long time ago, so
yeah, but
people's memory don't last that long.
I know. I'll be watching that very same thing happen, but so in my mind, and I'm sure you probably well, you tell me this. You guys, how many issues did you put out?
24.
Okay, and were they monthly or bi-monthly?
Bi-monthly, yeah, because as you said, it's a lot of work, and we put the first one together, we were like, there's no way we can put all this together in a month.
Right, and how many pages was it?
Ours was typically, I think, around 100, pretty long. I mean, it was like around...
Because we did 80 pages every time.
Yeah, we were around 80, 90, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and what happened, and when
I think we shortened it to 70 something with like. Well,
see, that's the thing. When we inherited it in '97, it had its run for several years, very glossy, and heavily, all color. And when we took it over, and we never changed this. We made half black and white, half color, really cheap paper. And just because I thought, and I still think that people cared about the content. They didn't care about, how beautiful a picture are you going to put of a cattle mutilation? It's pretty icky stuff. Or every time we get I'm sure you do the same thing. Every time you open up your email and there's an image and it's some kind of a blob of light, and the poor person taking it says, you have no idea what I really saw.
Well, it made it hard, because we, wanted it to be beautiful as well, and our graphic designer really pushed us. So it was just as difficult getting the content as getting together, the graphics to make it that way. So it's another aspect that's very difficult.
Are you, how can I put this? The future. I wonder what I'm going to do, and I wonder what radio has blossomed on the internet. We're on radio right now. We're talking, and people will then go to internet sites and stuff. But your site, I think, has a whole new life of its own, doesn't it? In terms of the news is still there.
Right, yeah, and I think that's what's really sustaining us is that there really isn't a UFO news hub out there.
There isn't yet, but you should be it, don't you think?
Well, and we are. So, right now I think we definitely are. Some people have been starting to call us, almost like mainstream media, which is nice because we do interact a lot with mainstream media. More and more, which is also nice. But, so that's great. I really appreciate that. And I'm Mr. Pollyanna, I love everybody and stuff. And
I love that about you.
You have UFO Digest out there and everything, which is great.
Right.
But they do a lot of opinion pieces and a lot of other stuff, which is good. I think that's great. People should definitely check them out. They may be somewhat similar. There's UFO Chronicles, who we work with quite a bit because he, does a kind of an aggregate of news out there. But, we every day are focused on all the news going on. And really, that's what, you had asked me about burnout when I was on your show.
Right.
That's what I can't pull myself away from. Because even with MUFON, John Schuessler was the one who used to send out emails and information about UFO stories and got me into it. And once he stopped, I picked that up, and I couldn't stop. So I've been doing that ever since then. I started up my own webpage and podcast, UFO Think Tank, and really that all evolved into Open Minds, to where we do that now every day, where we post all of the stories that are out there and then write about some of them ourselves. And even when I got my own burnout a couple years ago, I even left Open Minds for a 9-month period or something like that. Yeah, I couldn't stop. I was still.
That's exactly. I'm glad to hear this because.
It's like breathing. I created a website called UFO Daily News, and I still kept posting news on there because it's like, I don't know. I watch the news and I can't help but want to share it with people.
Yeah, me too.
When I see the whole out there, I'm like, there's people need this news and information. And there are some other news outlets out there here and there, but they get so cliquey and they're not inclusive. And then it's like, we're just going to share it with our group of friends and researchers.
It's worse. There's number one, you and I probably appreciate more than most that this field has a very distinct history that shouldn't be lost in time. Right. How you were curious about the history of UFO Magazine, and one thing leads to another. It's also the history of the UFO field, and like Terence McKenna is in the old pages of UFO Magazine. Crop circles, that phenomenon sort of started. Again, UFO Magazine started in '86, and Vicki was careful to include everything. She included New Age stuff. She included conspiracy stuff. And when Don came into the picture, he was a former, let's say, he was more interested in nuts and bolts. Mm-hmm. And so the magazine kind of, thank God, stayed in that arena, but they did in fact cut off like a diseased limb. They cut off everything to do with spirituality and all that stuff. That was too woo-woo. But then alien abduction kind of began to become a thing during those years. Whitley Strieber and babies being taken away from women, in the night, fetuses and stuff. So so there's this weird history about this. It's a hit. Oh, and then the biggest thing I'm proud of is Colin Bennett. I love Colin Bennett. He's a great thinker, and he ties all this stuff together. This is part of our mythology, our American mythology at this point. And so when you talk about some sites are cliques, some sites only specialize in hybrid interactions, and some sites only do nuts and bolts. And so I can't stay away from it either. That's what's fascinating about the whole thing. And but the thing is, you at least joined MUFON and did this I joined the magazine, so my eyes were open. But for me, I'm kind of aware of how much I've lost in terms of how many cooties have gotten stuck on me now, and how I can't go back to mainstream. I don't think. Just like Bill thinks he doesn't get the right response for some of his nonfiction books that are not in this field at all because of UFO stuff. So but I think you're going to be the one probably to break into the mainstream. I really think so. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Because it's called Open Minds, do you feel an obligation to keep your mind open and to look at everything?
Well, and you know who challenges us on this is Mike Clellan, and he wrote a story, and he did an excellent job with a story, I think, about abduction and how his feeling, and he showed how there are abduction researchers who feel lots of people who see UFOs have also been abducted. They just don't know it.
Right.
Pretty out there story. But it's a valid story, like you said. It's part of the mythology. It's worth writing about and sharing with people. And I love the story because he went and did interviews. He got interviews from all of the leading abduction researchers, and so it's a very journalistically done, great story.
Yeah.
And he came to us, and how this came about is he's like, you guys don't cover enough of this sort of stuff.
Right.
And we told him, well, it just doesn't come across our desk that much. It's not that we're against it, and maybe our bias, keeps us from writing that stuff, but we're not against it, and it's not a conscious thing we're doing. And if you wanted to write something about that, we would love to review it and guide you and print that. So he called us on that, and I'm glad he did, and he wrote a story, and we posted it, and I think he did a great job. So yeah, sometimes people do question. We are open-minded. A lot of people say, well, you debunk too much. Well, you know what? We're looking for answers.
That's
We're not
number
looking
one.
for blind faith.
Exactly. That's your number one mandate, I think, is to debunk if it's possible. Because it's the stuff you can't. It's just like Blue Book. It's the stuff that they can't debunk that we're focusing on here. We could care less. I mean, but on the other hand, we as Americans are too quick to be told it's swamp gas, and then everybody walks away and says, "Oh, thank God." We all want it to be debunked, really, because we want the ones that are hovering over our house to be debunked. But but if it's on the other side of the world, maybe not. Maybe But
I mean, we're just really looking for answers, keeping an open mind, and covering that stuff when it comes around. Because it is interesting and it is part of the mythology, and I think that's great. And I don't know, you can't blame us too much. I mean, we have videos on Dan Burrish and a lot of really out there stuff that we personally don't feel is the real deal. But
that story haunts me because. I really because I forget who brought us that story, but very much made a big theatrical kind of thing about it. In other words, Ron Garner, his name is.
Yeah.
He brought us the story, and he made it very serious, and he made us sit down and in a darkened room, watch Burish and stuff. And we investigated like crazy and came to our own conclusions and wrote a cover story on it, and felt that it was completely hogwash. Yeah. And the reason I bring this up or talk about this one is because Project Camelot drives me crazy because They do it all. They do everybody, and they give them all the same level. There's no editorial. It's like, we're going to take everybody in, and we're just going to let you judge. And I think when you find out something's not true, you owe it to your readers to tell them that. Why waste people's time? You know, why ask other people? I mean, if you know for a fact it's not true, if you saw the person kind of, making stuff up as they're going along, that's your, why be a reporter if you don't report that? That, I'm not, so anyway, so yeah. And so.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, people get, we brought to the public this guy, Frank, I can't remember his name right now, but an Air Force guy, an older man, and he just kind of makes stuff up. And when Antonio interviewed him, he knew this, but we posted the interview and it went wild.
Yeah.
And people get so upset, but there's so many holes and changing of the story and the same thing with, people, Burrish. Luckily these days, Burrish was more popular before, but, one of the funny things is my boss was really into his story and he really liked it. And he treated him so nice.
Oh, nice.
They came to the conference.
I remember that. I remember reading about that because
This is funny.
Yeah. And there was
Well, this was weird. Because his wife's name was Marcia Kane, and there was another lady named Marcia Kane who was there, same name, which is weird. So they came in to check in. They said, it should be under Marcia Kane. It was actually under his name. They said Marcia Kane's already checked in. They got upset and left. People saw them because, our conference, we have so many people. There's people all over the place. People saw them walk into their little red car and drive away.
Yeah.
He writes this big thing that the government had people waiting for them in their room, and so MJ-12 whisked them away in a black helicopter.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I lost my train of thought because that's shocking, really.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I can't think of what I was going to say. I was going to add something to that, but you're.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but anyways, that's interesting.
That's bad.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, but that's a demonstration of I guess
when you know something,
Yeah, when you know something, and we certainly share that, and we share when we know stuff, and sometimes people don't like it, or I always share when Michael Horn tries to kind of be completely false in his claims and threaten us.
And then of course what you're going to run into is
people get mad and blow it off, and it's like
a lot of these people that we're mentioning, they are themselves little economic empires. They bring in they fill the auditorium, and and so
they love the controversy.
So anyway.
Brings them in the spotlight somewhere. So, I guess before I let you go, now that we're on this topic, and I know because we've been talking for a long time and we could probably go on forever, but like you said, you'd like to share the truth with who are the charlatans out there. Are there any some that really catch your eye, or that where you're like, everybody needs to know that this person or that person is I want to give you a chance to say, warn my audience on who to stay away from.
So I'm in trouble with like an additional group of people.
If you want, you don't have to if you don't want to. But if you would like to.
There are so many more. I don't want. Well, here's the thing. Each of these entities, they have economic reasons to keep on making their story bigger and bigger. And then you know that sometimes somebody will come to you with a really good story and it's real and it's true, and then they become famous, and then they have to keep making that story bigger and better.
Yeah.
And then, so there's a lot of that.
That's a really big problem, what you just said, too. Yeah. I think people would be shocked to find out how much that really happens, and it's so sad.
Yeah. Well, what else can they do? If you're only one story, you have to make it worse and bigger and so forth and so on, because you're going to ask for donations, and then you're going to ask for more donations. And
well, maybe you'll agree, but I think Travis Walton is an example of someone who doesn't blow up or create more stories, and he does well with the
it's
original
true.
incident.
That's true. That's true, and it's a profoundly life-changing thing that
he could say, "Oh, you know what? The aliens came back. I saw them again last week."
Well, on the other hand, have you talked? Well, he is ripe with additional information. Let's just put it that way. More things seem to be happening to him, and I think there's a deeper well there than he has even let on. And I think there's many more interviews with Travis. We have Future Theater, so we still keep our hand in, but because it's Future Theater and like Open Minds, it's not UFO Magazine, we can go to other things a little bit. We have an audience that gets really mad if we stay too far away from UFOs, but we're right now exploring spiritual things a bit. And I have to say, someone sent a link last night to a movie that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and it's all about channeling. And I've always liked channeling the least of all the things in the field. I have felt that so many people come in and they just kind of put on a funny voice. Why the funny voice? And they've just, but this movie is, the minute I saw it was about channeling, I was going to turn it off. But out of respect for the person who sent the link, I watched it and I found it totally gripping. And I think it's called Tuned In. I should give you the exact thing since I watched it last night. It's really shockingly fascinating. And if you're a person who feels channeling's kind of icky, you might want to check this movie out. It is astounding and you might stay with it. And I'm looking as we speak. I believe it's called Tuned In. And in fact, let me just kind of let me find my little pile of stuff here. Okay. Digital. Yeah. So are you staying you're staying as editor for a bit, right?
Yeah, indefinitely. Really, the plans are, we can run pretty tight in that we have the Congress. We're looking at possible options for 2016 to grow it. We just got, the Guinness World Record for the biggest conference. So.
Well, I know. And I believe we'd be in the book, the Guinness World Record for the smallest. I believe we sponsored the least attended, smallest one ever, I believe.
Oh, wow. I don't know. They get pretty small.
No, this was bad. Literally at the end of a showing of one of the movies, there were only 3 people left in the audience and two of them were Bill and me. This is called Tuning In. That's the name of this video. And I don't have too much more information, but if you just go on YouTube or Google Tuning In, you will find this. And the director is David Thomas. So you can kind of put him in there too. I don't know. And this was from 2008. So, and it's people that you've probably heard of. There were these 5 channelers. One is a guy who channels a thing called Bashar. So forth and so on. And I'm personally right now doing my research. I'm going down each of these people trying to find the holes in their story because it's a very compelling movie. You won't be wasting your time if you watch this, I think. So. Okay.
I'm going to check it out. Sounds very interesting.
This was not so bad, Alejandro.
I told you, this was completely fascinating. I know people are going to love this.
They're going to hate it.
You're crazy. They're going to love, I know, my audience. They're going to love this, and I knew they would. I knew you would have I've been fascinated getting the history I know there's tons of people who want to hear, because they're asking us all the time, what happened with UFO Magazine? What happened? So, tons of people are going to want to know this whole history. The history with you all in Corso. It's very fascinating.
Well, let me make sure I say this at the end. I'm saying this about Linda Moulton Howe and Paula Harris. I don't really like to knock down other people who are working hard. And I'm saying both of these things as a way of kind of making a bridge, if possible. If they were to hear such things, I would like to bury the hatchet and, start anew. I'm not doing this to say either of those 2 people, they've got a huge body of work, each of them. But this Corso thing, personally has made it so that I've never been able to be friends and stuff. So I wanted to just kind of put it out there that way. I'm a person too, I guess. and I believe that.
Paula and I have been able to stay friends. We've at times been very close, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah.
And I know she, I think, has more problems with that than I do, because I don't mind, but I sometimes feel like maybe she's kind of like, oh, Alejandro, and keeps me at a distance sometimes. But I understand what you're saying. So, and I think that it's important that you said that. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I think
and it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, but try to support your fellow journalists here and try to get the story out and
respect each other for our own perspectives.
Exactly. Try to go as a group. If we go as a group, we will become the mainstream. You wait and see. But not if we, Corso said this. He never had to worry about disinformation because the UFO field takes care of that. They stab each other in the back. So he was right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yep, this has been wonderful. I think we'll definitely need to talk again because this has been so fun, and I'm sure there's more we can talk about.
Well, we'll see.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I think that many other people should interview you because you have a lot of great stuff to say.
Thanks for being so persistent. And
I know. Yeah. I'm glad I was, and I knew it would be great, and it has been.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Nancy for joining us. I think she was a great interview. She is a really cool lady. What a history. I mean, some really interesting stuff. I personally, because I'm fascinated with, her and Birnes and their work in this field, and I'm also fascinated by the history of UFO Magazine, because it was such a big deal in this field, has been for so long. And so I thought this interview was completely fascinating, and she's great. She's a lot of fun. So thank you so much to Nancy for joining us. You can go to read more about her and Bill at futuretheater.com. Futuretheater.com. No funny business. Sometimes people have a underscore, dash, or something like that. Nothing like that. Just futuretheater.com. This is her and Bill Birnes' podcast on Dark Matter Radio. They're also on the PSN radio network, which also broadcasts UFO Think Tank. Open Minds UFO Radio, formerly UFO Think Tank Radio. But so you can hear both of us on the air there at PSN. So you can go listen to Nancy and Bill interview different UFO people on their own podcast. So really cool. Thank you again to Nancy for being on the show. That was awesome. Speaking of awesome, I do want to mention, for any of you that live in the Sedona area, I'm actually going to be speaking at Sedona MUFON on Friday, and I'm going to be talking about official government UFO investigation agencies. So these are active official governmental organizations. I'm going to talk about them and why they got started, the details behind that, and really the amazing UFO cases that got these guys rolling. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm also speaking in Phoenix MUFON in December, so on different topics. But we'll talk more about that later. So if you can make it, that would be a lot of fun to see you all. Also, you can see Jason, Maureen, and I on a brand new episode of Spacing Out that we just launched Friday. Of course, we have one up every Friday. And I don't think I've mentioned this before, but we have a Chinese UFO Files video up, too, where we talk about the history of UFOs in China and some really interesting and cool stuff when it gets to the history there, including how the Chinese government helped get ufology started in China, printed their first UFO magazine, really, for a long time, and also that paid to get UFO sightings translated for Wendell Stevens to create a book on Chinese UFOs. So really, really cool stuff. I think Antonio and I talked about this before on a show. We did a show on it, I think. If not, we should have. But really cool stuff, so you'll have to check that out on our YouTube channel. Of course, these stories and everything you could get to at openminds.tv. Again, we've got the UFO Congress coming up. The rooms have not sold out yet at the host hotel, but I'm sure they're getting really close. This is about the time of year when they do, and people signing up for the conference is at pace with last year, which was our biggest one ever. So we're really starting to get a lot of registrations, and I'm sure that the hotel's going to fill up. So go to ufocongress.com to register and look up the hotel and reserve yourself a room. You can also find that information at openminds.tv. It's going to be an awesome year. We're going to have some really, really cool stuff this year. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And a lot of people are going to be able to make it that haven't been able to make it before, like other podcasters. Like Martin Willis, who, I'm on his podcast every week talking news, and also Angel Espino, and I'm on his too, talking news sometimes. So a lot of friends we haven't met face-to-face or don't get to see often are going to be there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to register for that. And remember, past videos you can watch at our video portal at openminds.tv. It only costs a couple bucks, and you can watch some of the past incredible discussions. We've got really the first one, 2011 videos going up now, and some of the other videos we've done. And we've got new videos going up there every month. If you just want to have full access too, you can subscribe for something like $5.99, and then you have full access to all the videos, and we put